What's up you guys, welcome back to Reignited and welcome back to our Cheap Hemi Challenge series. Now if you haven't seen the first two episodes of this series, I highly recommend you watch those first so you can see where we stand now. This is a 2006 Chrysler 300C that the goal was to try to purchase a vehicle that had some engine problems and buy it cheap enough that a high schooler could actually rebuild this car and have something cool to drive for a very, very low budget. That was the idea. However, if you've been watching so far, you know that this car has a lot of problems. Some very, very sketchy stuff was done to it. And in this episode, we're gonna try to drill down, try to pinpoint exactly what failed on this car, and then see what the future holds for it. Hope you guys stay with me. Okay, I'm looking down in the intake here and I'm not seeing an intake valve seat failure. That looks okay, so maybe it was the exhaust valve seat, or maybe it was something else entirely. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna go ahead and pull the valve cover off here and see if maybe we have a broken valve spring, but it doesn't matter anyway. This whole engine's got to come out anyway because of the damage to the piston, but we'll go ahead and pull this valve cover off and take a look. All right, I'm trying to figure out here, did they slap a set of reman heads on an engine that was already damaged? I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. This is very strange because I'm not seeing that the valve is dropped down on the exhaust side. I would have expected to see either the intake or the exhaust pressed down because the valve usually can't fully, or it'll have some slop in it, but I'm not feeling anything, so I'm not sure. I'm wondering if they just slapped a reman head directly on top of a damaged block. So clearly this engine was just put together, so I'm really wondering if maybe they just made an assembly error on this thing. Obviously we have a piston that is damaged, so I need to continue looking at that. But I've kind of changed my mind here. Before I actually pull the engine, I'm gonna pull the cylinder head. I just want to look and see what's going on. I'm like, what is happening here? So I want to physically see it and see if I can figure out what they did here. So yeah, I think we're looking at some classic valve seat failure here. I mean, look at the way the combustion chamber is chewed up in there. Don't mind the thunderstorm in the background, but the combustion chamber is all chewed up in there. And then interestingly, I think it flew over into this cylinder, went through the intake and went to this cylinder, because I think this is the piece of the valve seat right there. But it's kind of interesting because I'm not seeing it suck down as far as it normally is when a valve seat comes out, but I'm almost positive that's what happened here. The engine itself didn't fare quite as well. I'm a little worried about the engine. If you look down in the cylinder here, yeah, we got some pretty good marks on the side there and some pretty good marks on the side there. You can look at the piston top itself. That's the upper ring. That's never good when you can see the ring. And then it's pretty chewed up there. And then some damage on this piston as well. That I could probably just clean up and it'd be okay to run it, but this one's definitely done for. And I'm a little concerned about the marks on the piston wall, if those are gonna come out with a hone job or not. No way to tell until I take the engine out and take it apart. Bit of an unexpected find here. Look down here in cylinder number 2. Oh, look at that. We're missing a big old chunk out of that piston too. That's all tore up. So, kind of thinking that both of these reman heads are junk. Passenger side cylinder head, I mean, might be repairable, to be honest. That one's not nearly as tore up as the other side. However, this is interesting, look at this. So this one was running like that. What the heck is going on with these heads? This one was previously damaged and then they ran it again like that. They just cleaned it up. All right. New hypothesis happening here. So After pulling off this passenger side cylinder head and seeing that it already had some cylinder head damage, that then there was soot gone up over that. So here's what's crazy about this situation. Those heads are clearly reman heads, but I'm not seeing a valve seat failure in there. So what I'm thinking is that this vehicle previously had a valve seat failure. They put these cylinder heads on here, and then they put the original intake manifold back on there. Now, when these valve seats fall out, they get smashed into a million pieces. Like I mentioned, they go up into the intake manifold and they make it sound like a maraca in there. All of those little bits of metal get trapped in there, and regardless of how hard you try to clean those intake manifolds out, there's usually a really good chance that some of that metal is still stuck in there. And I think that's what happened with this engine. I think they stuck that original intake manifold back on there, they drove it, and sure enough, one of those pieces of metal found its way back down inside the cylinders, or multiple pieces of metal, because as you saw, cylinders 1 and 2, the pistons are destroyed on there. And then also cylinder number 3 has some piston damage on there. So I think metal got into all of those cylinders and just destroyed everything in there. So that's what's going on. I'm pretty sure, based on what I'm seeing here, I'm pretty sure that's what happened to this engine. The problem is that I may have played myself on this one. As a mechanic, you generally think I can fix anything. And the truth is I can fix this. However, the amount of money it's going to take to actually repair this engine has now fully exceeded the cost of whatever I was going to get out of this vehicle at the end of the day. So I'm kind of thinking I might have to wash my hands of this particular project at this point. Certainly not what I was hoping for you guys. I was wanting to really carry this thing through and show you that you can bring a cheap vehicle back to life. Generally you can, but sometimes you get the short end of the stick like I did on this one. So we're gonna take one last shot at this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the oil pan off. I'm gonna take the number 1 piston and rod combo out of there. I'm gonna run my 3-stone hone through that cylinder, see if I can't clean up those cylinder walls. If I cannot clean up the cylinder walls with a simple hone job, this engine is quite simply not worth rebuilding. At that point, you'd have to bore out the cylinders, install oversized pistons, literally not worth the money when you can just go get another engine to throw in there. And this car, definitely not worth that kind of money. So this is kind of a last ditch attempt to save this project. We'll see what we can do. Well, I'm just doing a quick initial pass. I mean, there's definitely some deeper marks in there, but it'd be interesting to see if we can get these things out of here. I'm gonna get a little bit more lube in here and we'll see what we can do. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be able to fix this one. Those grooves are just... These grooves are just a little bit too deep in here. You can still feel them significantly. Even with the gloves on, you can feel it, which is never a good sign. So I think these cylinders are done. Well, this was definitely a disappointment, but I do want to make one more point here before we go ahead and push this project to the side and out of the way. Now, so many people have said that the reason that the issue of the Hemis having the lifter tick or lifter failure is because of the lifter position, that it is so horizontal that it doesn't get the splash from the crank, and that is the problem why it fails. I'd like to debunk that particular rumor, and I believe it is a myth because of this reason. This is a 2006 Hemi engine. Now, honestly, we don't really see lifter failures with the 2006 model. The lifter failures really started after 2009, and that's when they introduced the VVT and they changed the block a little bit and they changed the camshaft. Now it's a different size. So what I'd like to point out here to debunk this myth is that this vehicle has 240,000 miles on it. So I would say that at this point, if we're going to have a lifter failure on this car, it would have happened by now. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of the lifters from this vehicle. Even though it had catastrophic engine failure of a different form, I'm gonna pull all of these lifters out, and if even one of these lifters is failed, I'm gonna give you guys a free t-shirt. There'll be a little giveaway thing for that. I'm telling you right now, I don't think there's going to be even one lifter failure on here. And keep in mind that being pre-2016, this has the older style lifters in it with the smaller needle bearings. I honestly don't think that's the issue at all. In my personal opinion, at this point, I believe that the issue was more related to failed hardening of the cam lobes on the 09 and up camshafts. I think there was an issue with the camshaft hardening itself, that the hardening was eaten away, and then that is what caused our lifter failure. So that's just my personal opinion right now. Let's go ahead and get all of these lifters pulled out, and I'll see if I have to eat my words. First lifter, no movement. Second lifter, no movement. Third lifter, no movement. Fourth lifter, no movement. Lifter, no movement. No movement. No movement. No movement. I'm having trouble getting these other lifter sets out of here because of the chain going across them. So let me go ahead and get that chain out of the way. We'll check with the rest of these lifters. No movement. No movement. Oh, no movement. No movement. No movement. No movement. No movement. And our very last one, no movement. So once again, to clarify, all of these lifters have the older style, smaller needle roller bearings in them, and yet all 16 of them are perfect. This is on a 240,000 mile engine. If it was a design flaw as far as the angle of the lifters themselves, no question by now these would have failed. Now, I don't know the history of this engine. Did it have a cam or lifter job replaced in the past? Possibly, but I sincerely doubt it. I'm telling you that the lifter issues only really cropped up after 2009 when they changed the camshaft itself to a different design than what these have in them. So I really think that is the issue, the failed hardening of the cam lobes themselves. My personal belief, that is what is causing our lifter failures, not the actual lifters themselves, and certainly not the design of how they are positioned within the block. Well, that was definitely a disappointment here that we had to kick this car down the road, but I want to be absolutely clear with you guys. I feel like I need to clarify exactly what my reasoning was on why I did that. Now, I've talked a little bit already about the financial aspect of it. So the thing I need you guys to realize is that I do run a business. The whole point here is I need to make some money back from these cars. So therefore, there's a certain number, a dollar amount that I can put into this car, and then once it exceeds that amount, I won't make any money on it anymore. The amount of money I make from the YouTube videos is negligible. It's very, very small. So at this point, I can't really afford to put a whole lot more into a car than it's worth to get it out. Now that's the business aspect of it. Now let's flip it around here and talk about the ethical side of it. Now for me personally, looking at that car and seeing all of the really, really sketchy work that had been done to it, I honestly could not in good conscience sell that car on to somebody else knowing all of the issues that it had with it and some of the really flat out dangerous stuff that I saw that was done to it. So that was a huge factor in my decision there. I very, very easily could have just thrown a used piston in here, thrown some used heads on here, and this engine would have run just fine, and I guarantee you it would not even have misfired. But I would know that it's done in a super sketchy way, and there's just no way I could feel comfortable selling that car. So that was a huge part of my reasoning here, guys. So here's the deal. We are not ending this series, the cheap Chrysler series or just the cheap Hemi series period. You guys are responding really well to that, so it is something I'm going to keep doing. However, that was just not the right candidate. Now, there are a lot of cheap Hemis out there with a lot of engine concerns. I've bought them before, I can find them again. So I am currently on the lookout for a new one that is going to be a better base to start with and something that you should want to actually work on and build into something that was cool and something that you can be proud of. That particular car, you could dump a boatload of money into it and it just would not be that great of a car at the end of the day. So I think absolutely 100% it was the right move to move it on down the road. Now, interestingly enough, I did keep the good transmission out of that car, and I kept the engine core and also a bunch of the other engine parts and everything else that came with it, like the PCM, the drive-by-wire setup, some of the wiring components in there. So I did actually get a lot of parts value out of it. And when I took it to the scrapyard, I made $332 on scrap. So I'm gonna say I pretty much came out even as a wash on that one. Now I wanna hear from you guys too. Regarding this cheap Hemi series, a lot of you guys mentioned this about putting a certain dollar cap amount on it. I totally agree with that. I wanna ask you guys, what do you think that dollar amount cap should be? Do you think it should be $5,000, $4,000? I'm thinking somewhere in that range. So you guys tell me, what do you think the dollar cap should be for our cheap Hemi series? All of that being said, I'm sorry to rant on that for a little while there, but I hope you guys understand the reasoning behind that. And again, like I said, I'm looking for a new cheap Hemi, and we'll get this series restarted as soon as we possibly can. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are always supportive, and I want you to hit that notification bell so you see the new videos as soon as they come out. We'll see you next time on Reignited.